Hi, I'm Rowan Ostrom, founder of Beyond Careers, a conscious careers and coaching platform. Boardrooms and Breakthroughs is a brand new podcast aimed to help our listeners find direction, purpose, and fulfillment in their lives beyond the traditional 9 to 5. We will be talking new ways of work, conscious leadership, women's well-being, career pivots, and so much more. This is a podcast for ambitious women who want more out of life. So, today we have a very special episode on menopause and well-being in the workplace. Now, in our return to work survey, Beyond Careers respondents noticed that nearly 94% felt that it's important to raise awareness of women's health in the workplace. So I'm joined by Dr. Vanessa Emsley with a PhD from Middlesex University in endurance exercise and the hallmarks of aging, and Gayu Lewis, a licensed menopause coach, board certified integrative nutrition health coach. Welcome, Vanessa and Gayu.
Hello.
Thank you. Anyways, I just loved the whole intro of why you started that podcast. Very, very interesting.
Thank you. It means so much to me, and I'm so happy to be here with both of you who really, we speak a similar language. I know that we're championing for well-being in the workplace as well as really holistic, employee-centric workplaces. And it's really just beyond the traditional 9 to 5, isn't it? It's about, I would like to think that well-being lends to better productivity. So companies that effectively have well-being at the heart of their culture see better performance and results. True? What are your
True,
thoughts?
very true. So in the UK, the statistics that are coming out now is that 1 in 7 women will actually give up their job and remove themselves from the economic workplace, probably at a time when they are having to support kids at university and having other costs. They will actually physically remove themselves because their menopause symptoms are so severe. And a lot of women, about 1 in 4, will not even be comfortable enough to go and venture to speak to their boss or their superior or their line report to say, look, I'm struggling. And I think we gloss over, we look at the physical signs, but we very seldom actually really start to dig deep in what are the actual cognitive, mental health, as well as social knock-on effects of menopause and how this can really be quite detrimental to women, not just in the workplace, but their social community as well as their relationships and family and marriages.
Oh, absolutely. It's all interrelated. So Did you say 1 in 7?
Yes, 1 in 7.
Leave the workforce. So let's talk menopause for someone like myself who's, slightly in denial about it all. When
I think every woman is.
Well, what sort of age group, when should we be thinking about menopause? Because if we're saying 1 in 7, is that sort of mid-career? Is that somewhere in the mid-30s, you'd say? Guy, what do you reckon?
I would say, ideally, 38 years onwards, you need to start making the right lifestyle changes.
Yeah, right, I'm there then.
Because I would say that because of our exposure to toxic, it's more. I think we're hitting perimenopause and menopause much, much earlier compared to what happened in the past. I would say from 38 years onwards, start recognizing the signals or, what your body's talking to you and try making the right lifestyle changes.
Right, that's really interesting. Vanessa, what do you think in terms of signals?
Yeah, the average age is 55. But, for some women, they can go into menopause really early. I went into menopause at 45. Mm-hmm. And the duration of perimenopause up until that point is anything from 5 to 10 years before.
Right.
So you are looking around 40 at least to be your very minimum where you should be getting your baseline, things like DEXA scan, getting ultrasounds or thermography of your breasts,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of getting your baseline fundamental blood tests and everything done so that you know where you are, so that you can start tracking what's going on. Because if you don't own your health data and your biodata, you are never going to be able to advocate for yourself. And unfortunately, part of this conversation is we as women have to advocate for ourselves. So yeah, very similar age.
Okay. So with I was reading an interesting thing well, as you do on Instagram and while you're doom scrolling. I came across a really interesting post saying that, now as women are having children in their 40s, more and more women are having children in their 40s. This sort of coincides with that general age reference that you just shared. How would you recommend that someone manages their symptoms, and also how do you manage menopause alongside raising young children?
There's a very funny thing that I always tell people. I said, when you hit your perimenopause, your hormonal levels are just so up and down that you're actually probably more prone to be more fertile than probably you were, in your mid-30s is what I would say from a funnier aspect. When you have children, you automatically also go through a lot of hormonal change that comes with it. Menopause is on a slightly different side, where it's the estrogen which mainly takes the hit, right? Which is our main hormone in our body, especially the women, in terms of it balances everything for us. It makes a big difference. But anyways, having a child in your in your early 40s, you will have a hormonal change. So I wouldn't say menopause or perimenopause would affect you at that time. It's a different bodily changes that happen at that time. It will come back to its normal. It's not that it's going to be the symptom that you're going to get as perimenopause is going to be severe because you had a baby in your early 40s.
Okay. Yeah. What would you say to that, Vanessa, in terms of just looking at also tying that in with anti-aging and longevity? Because, we're really scratching the surface, I feel, because if the average woman's lifespan, at least from some of the references I've checked in the US, the guidance is about 80, right?
That's
So
85
or 85 even.
Yeah.
So we're really sort of like halfway through.
Yeah.
Like, this is sort of like navigating our second act, if you will.
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, in 1900s, right, the average lifespan of a woman was 45 to 50 maximum. Now it's actually reached to 85. So we've got and that used to happen. Why? Because they hit menopause and then you've got no estrogen in your body and you're more prone to cardiovascular diseases. That was probably one of the main reasons of high mortality or lower lifespan for women, I would say. But I think with a lot of science and development, and the way we live and stuff, the longevity is increased, but that part of your life from, when you hit your menopause, which is 50, which is, I'm saying, when you completely stop your menstrual cycle, and then you could still got about 35 odd years if I say if I hit menopause at 50, it's a long period. We've got to take care of ourselves earlier so that the next 35 years, you're not just living, you're actually thriving.
We're not just existing, right?
So I'll go back to your question. The challenge is that it's not just estrogen. You actually drop progesterone as well. So for a lot of women, when you look to say, okay, so if you're in perimenopause and you've got a young baby, the challenge then is often with with progesterone is that you've got alloprogesterone, which then helps you with sleep. It releases GABA, which is one of your sleep neurotransmitters. So you lose estrogen, but you also have got no progesterone. So the reality is estrogen is an anti-inflammatory molecule. And when you go into perimenopause, it's classified as an inflammatory state. So stress is compounded. You're stressed out anyway. You're not sleeping because you've got a baby.
My cortisol levels seem pretty high.
Yeah, you're not sleeping because you have a young baby. You're probably managing that side of it. You're trying to work and be awake at work. You're losing your cognitive function because you don't have estrogen, and you're not actually sleeping well because you don't have enough progesterone, and you probably got night sweats.
I think this is a great time to get a plug for like a caffeine sponsor, right?
Yeah, caffeine sponsor.
I don't know.
It's so the reality is it's not just, you've got to look at your entire hormonal profile, including even estrogen, because estrogen helps you to retain muscle mass. And muscle is probably the one biggest longevity lever molecule that you can kind of do. If what's the best thing you can do for healthy aging? Have good muscle mass.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and so it's really important to look at your entire hormonal profile and then make sure that everything is beautifully balanced. And how you do that is up to you. If you don't decide to do hormone replacement therapy, that's fine. There are other options that you can then support. It's not right for everyone.
At the risk of asking a really naive question, what's the role of testosterone then? Because I've also read through my own little research that testosterone is present first of
Yes.
all. And I know I've suffered with mild PCOS, which is still sort of under management, if you will. How does one manage PCOS symptoms, and where does like testosterone come into play with the perimenopause and menopause discussion? And I'll keep the floor open to both of you, so feel free to jump in.
So estrogen is made from testosterone by the aromatase enzyme.
Okay.
So if we don't have enough testosterone, it will impact how much estrogen our body makes, converts to estrogen and estradiol, E1 and E2. So testosterone is also good for libido. So if you want to have a baby, you need that testosterone. It's good for cognitive function and also to make sure that you retain muscle mass. So while testosterone is classified as a male hormone, we need it.
My technical term for it's just mojo.
Yeah, it is. It's your libido hormone.
It's my mojo.
And you do need it. And it needs to be in balance. And it's not just for men. It's for us women too. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
So I think that's just, testosterone is important. In terms of PCOS, it depends what your cause is. So PCOS, there's 4 different puzzle pieces. It's a syndrome because we don't have a clear diagnosis route for it. And testosterone imbalance, androgens, can be one of them. But often it's also linked to insulin resistance in 70% of cases. So, understanding, and trying to pinpoint is individual. It's individual for each person.
Fair enough. And I know that you're going to jump in with
PCOS is
nutrition
also
too.
hereditary, right? There's certain, it kind of falls in that line of the hereditary disease. Syndrome, I would say, I wouldn't say disease. But again, for some people, PCOS, it could affect them, and some it could be just existent because it came to you as a gift, but it doesn't affect you. So it's, a lot of people get diagnosed with PCOS. I think about 80% of women currently are diagnosed with PCOS.
Yeah, the more and more we have an open conversation around it, I've also realized it's fairly common.
Yep.
In the past, we'd probably be really nuanced about these discussions, whereas I think just the education around, which is sort of why we're here, is to be able to shed light on what are really natural phenomena.
Yeah.
Right?
But don't you think that so they estimate it's about 80%, but a lot of women actually don't have a clear diagnosis, but they're saying, but that goes to show just how imbalanced our overall hormonal profiles are as women in the world these days.
Yeah.
Which is quite scary.
It's a great point. And actually, it's one of the questions I have in mind for both of you is, what are your thoughts on conventional and functional medicine? Because, I think now we're sort of in this place where, like you said, there's either misdiagnosis or a lot of women, like myself as well included, who receive different sets of information from various, and again, it's no criticism of the practice itself, but I do tend to feel that doctors, the pharmaceutical industry, they're trained in very specialist areas, whereas we might be missing a step when it comes to an integrative approach to medicine.
Speaking my language.
And again, I'm sure there's pros and cons to it all. So I'd love to actually hear what you think in terms of where we're heading and what are the areas of opportunity. Like, what would you say to someone who's navigating their journey? They've got various sets of diagnosis and they're not really sure about what their next step is. Do you want to take that?
I'll take it. So that's actually what I consult as well very closely. I do development in genetics and reporting for women in menopause and perimenopause in the UK for a company called Wellbeing. And that is exactly where we sit, is that traditional medicine has got a lot of good aspects, and I never want to dish that at all.
We're not here to bash.
No, not at all. But I think the challenge is my cousin's a doctor and their education, and he'll say to me, Ness, we don't get that education. The things you're telling me are so interesting, but I've never been exposed to that. As well as time. So when you look at how the allopathic traditional medicine is done, you get a 15, 20-minute window and out you go. Yeah. And that's just the circumstances around how that business, it's a business model, has been built.
And it varies in different countries and sort of regulation as well by the jurisdiction.
when you look at functional medicine, the whole point of functional medicine is to take multiple sets of data, information, and to try and put it in a manner so that the patient and the client can understand it. But it needs time. Cracking a client, like I always say, like I'm a detective. I'm always sitting there analyzing, researching, reading, but it takes a huge amount of time. So if I see a client, it's a 90-minute session, I can guarantee you that's a 5-hour slot. By the time I've really invested in making sure that I am helping that woman understand every single nuance, backtracking to things like childhood, because trauma, even something like a traumatic child event, will increase your risk of breast cancer. You know, we're recording this in October. We know it's breast cancer month.
Extremely, yeah.
But also,
relevant.
trauma sits in the cells, and that's going to impact how your body reacts. So, you know, even having to dig and scratch really deep into, you know, the nitty-gritty of someone, but you can have some incredible results, which I just think are a testimony. And it's just, how do we take that into more people at a more affordable price? Because let's face it, functional health can be very expensive.
Well, I follow Dr. Gabor Mate, and I believe that he speaks about this and how trauma impacts inflammation and it shows up in our body. And I think there's also a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, if I'm not mistaken. But how would you respond to, say, cynics who might challenge that idea and who, of course, it's like you said, Vanessa, we're not here to dish on conventional medicine. I personally feel that they tend to coexist. And I think and they must, to an extent where, you know, the way medicines have evolved now, you've got all these exceptional ways of intervening. And at the same time, there's also preventative, you know, sort of like machinery, as we'd call it. And that's coming from my real estate days, PPM, planned preventive maintenance, right? So I kind of see them complementing each other. But it's coming back to my question, what would you say to the cynics who perhaps don't necessarily appreciate the beauty of functional or integrative approaches to nutrition and medicine?
You know, I have nothing against them. It's just how they take it. But I think in general, I always tell people that if you go to a doctor and he tells you, this is what you're going to do, these are the tests you're going to do, and blah, 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 ask him why. I know a lot of people who don't even question why is he prescribing me these medicines or these tests that I need to know, to do, you know, to understand what's happening in my body. Ask more.
Self-advocacy, right?
Yeah, ask. I'm not saying, again, you know, you become Google yourself and you question the doctor, but at least be a bit more involved. It's a
little more assertive, like just to get to the bottom of things or be curious about your own body, I suppose, right?
So, you know, ask questions, and then, you know, even again, like Dr. Vanessa mentioned, it's nutrition didn't exist in the, you know, when you studied medicine, nutrition was not part of your curriculum. So it's nothing like if you ask a doctor, what should you eat? He'll just say, eat some regular food. He'll never tell you, you know, eat this, it's got this nutrient, you know, you got to supplement this. No, they'll just tell you, okay, you're low on, you know, magnesium, just take magnesium supplement. He'll not tell you what else can you supplement naturally with. So I think that's where the challenge exists with the modern medicine. But yes, if you have a headache, I think the immediate relief would be to take a pill because you're going to go for a meeting. Otherwise, I would say use essential oil. I think it's got a lot of benefits. But then there are certain things that you can get immediate relief with allopathy. But
isn't it also like, I feel that we are so inclined to treat the symptom as opposed to the cause. And I do feel like that's a little bit prevalent. Like you said, just pop the pill and feel good, as opposed to maybe just exploring a little more around other ways to mitigate the risk instead.
I think the thing with the cynics is that, you know, your podcast is for people that are evolved and are looking for something more out of their life. They're looking for quality. They're looking for living a life that's good and well and has meaning. And I think if you're coming across cynics, that's okay. They're just not where you are, and that's fine. They're traveling a different journey. So I think that's just, you know.
I love that approach. It's also very reassuring, you know, because I believe that truly. And I think our listeners are very evolved. They're curious. I think that's sort of the growth mindset, if you will, right? It's about us being able to ask, discuss, not cancel, not bash, but just really have a sort of well-rounded discussion.
And not everything is going to work for every person because we are so uniquely individual
Right, of
at
course.
cellular level, genetic level, emotional, social, cultural level. There's just no ways that what works for you, it's not. So,
100%.
so that's okay. I'm happy with them.
So I want to take a step back because I know a little bit about you. I've gotten to know a little bit about you both and your own career transitions, and seeing as, I wouldn't say 100% of, but a large extent of our audience are women. I think we have also some really evolved men who like to listen in as well. What could you share a little bit about your own story and your own career transitions?
I'll go first.
You
Okay.
go.
Me, I was a little kid when I knew I wanted to be a chef. I think food's my passion. I chose that path and did hotel school, joined hotels, led a lot of kitchens. That was my amazing time that I had. But I think eventually, after you reach a certain level in the kitchens, you don't cook anymore. You're just managing people. That kind of took me off from what I wanted to really do in terms of food. So I actually moved out. I moved in different fields in the training industry, moved departments, did a lot with business development, sales, and all of that stuff. But eventually, my last role was with Expo 2020 Dubai. Amazing experience. I was the commercial head. But I think it was during that time, I think it was an immense learning, I would always say that, but that came with a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been very good with food and with fitness. I think these are two things that I've never compromised on. But there was this whole mindfulness aspect, which absolutely did not exist in my life, which almost led me to a burnout. I was probably on a borderline depression, but it was good that I noticed it and I said, shit, I need to get help. And that's how I got, then I had a coach who worked with me and helped me get out of it. And I realized that, a lot of time we're just rushing and trying to achieve so many things, we don't realize what's happening. So I said, that's about it. I think it's my body telling me that, dude, listen, calm down. Whatever you've achieved, it's good, but then you've got to, the rest of your life, you've got to take care. We've got 2 beautiful children. So I left my corporate career and then moved into becoming a coach. So then I went to study, got my certifications. And why a menopause coach is, I think during my whole coaching career, I met a lot of women who had perimenopausal symptoms, but the doctors were not, they were like you're too young to be going through menopause or perimenopause. So they were just giving them medication for depression or, getting them into insulin resistance tablets and stuff like that, which is not necessary. And then I said, there is a big gap. No one is educating. Then I said, somebody has to start speaking. There were few people, but I don't think few is enough. Every woman born on this earth will go through menopause, right? So it was like, come on, start speaking. So that's how I got my further specialization into menopause.
Well, we're all going to go through it at one point or the other in our lives. It's just, how many are willing to speak about it. So good on you for taking that leap. Dr. Vanessa, let's come to you.
Also, chef, that moved on. Mine's a little bit different. So I went into food science. So I've always loved data, dots, connecting dots. And I think it's just something that I just naturally have a tendency for, and I love to read. So I used to go from reading loads of books into reading loads of research journals. But I had an epiphany. I had ADHD as a child, but I was only diagnosed actually during perimenopause. I'll get into that in a bit if you want to talk about the genetics and what's going and why there's such an increase during perimenopause. And I really struggled at school until standard 8, sitting at the science desk with the sun shining down. I can remember this. And we started doing, Mrs. Cravenstein, back in Cape Town, started doing genetics. And I remember I had that epiphany where I actually literally fell off the chair in class because I could not believe that there was DNA that was going to control what color eyes I had. And it took me a long time to kind of get there. So I did food science, chefing school, off to the UK, and then ended up working for Powerade and sports, SA Rugby, And then when I was pregnant, I started retraining back into nutrition, which was my fundamental, and then did a nutritional science with functional medicine undergrad into nutrigenomics, so how nutrition and genetics, and then finished off my PhD degree in longevity and hallmarks of aging last year. So,
Incredible.
so yes, it was that epiphany, and it's just come all the way back.
I'd love to hear.
What are you
about
going to
this.
study next is what my question was going to be.
I'm not allowed to. It's called divorce proceedings. I think. No, I'm done for now. I think.
It's a sabbatical as of now.
I said that a while ago too. So yeah.
Until the next thing. I suppose that's part of just having that nature and wanting to push yourself to learn more, know more, and get deep into various subjects. Nutrigenomics. Tell me more.
I'll tell you one specifically in the role of perimenopause and estrogen. So we have an estrogen metabolic pathway, how our body manages estrogen. And in that pathway, your estrogen can go down 3 routes. 2, just know the numbers 2, 4, and 16. 2 is the one we really want. This is the good and protective estrogen that when it's in high levels, it actually reduces breast cancer risk, it reduces cardiovascular disease risk. But, due to genes and everything in the body, we can also send our estrogen down other pathways, which aren't necessarily bad, but if they are too high, they can cause DNA damage and they can cause growth of tumors. But at the same time, those 2, 4, and 16, actually we need 16 because it helps us with healthy bones. So the minute we go into menopause, we lose estrogen, including this good 16-OH molecule. And, we have increased risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis. So part of the whole kind of way to neutralize these and also keep our estrogen in balance, especially the 4-OH one, is a process called methylation. So if you've been around in any of the longevity areas, you would have heard of methylation. And the methylation rates are governed by a gene called COMT. So it's a methylation gene, and COMT is responsible for the methylation of both 2 and 4 estrogen. So the problem is that COMT, if you've got a very slow COMT gene variant, you actually will methylate slowly. So it can place you at risk if you're not supporting healthy methylation rates in the body. The challenge with COMT as well is that if it's slow, you also don't process catecholamine neurotransmitters like dopamine, which means you can get high levels of anxiety. So when you loop back, you go, okay, one of the side effects of perimenopause is anxiety. And COMT, and a lot of women are also getting diagnosed with a late onset or late diagnosis of ADHD. And that kind of links back to COMT. It is more complicated. And the problem is that you need COMT to keep you healthy with your estrogen levels. But when estrogen is low, estrogen, even though it's a hormone, has an epigenetic effect on COMT. So if your estrogen is low, your COMT gene, no matter what it is not working well. So you're not getting the protective effects, your anxiety is going up. And if you had maybe underlying ADHD that before, as a woman, we have mostly inattentive, you had been able to get on with your life, sort everything out, and now suddenly everything's under stress because of your low estrogen, your COMT isn't working as well, and you see the rates increase of ADHD. That's actually my next project, is to actually do a research paper and test late onset ADHD and estrogen levels.
I'm not even going to attempt to recap what Dr. Vanessa just said, but
can I ask her a question?
Yeah,
when you realized that you were diagnosed with ADHD, what did you do? What did you do to either did you overcome it, or you still feel that you have certain parts of it?
It's been interesting because as women and girls don't present with ADHD like they did traditionally back then. And my mom is actually a primary school teacher. And my mom said to me, "You were always anxious." I'm like, "Really?"
I'd like to understand the difference. Well, back then and now, is there difference in how the symptoms present?
Yes, so boys is generally hyperactive, though
Right.
not necessarily. Very loud, can't sit still. Girls are more inward. They withdraw,
Right.
but still can't pay attention, so they lose social cues. So a lot of anxiety, social cues, higher risk of bulimia, anorexia, suicide, depression in girls because we internalize. You can get combination. It does overlap. It's a very generic rule. Please don't quote me per se. But yeah, so that was the one thing. So it was quite a time of realization of, hang on, what could my life have been if I had understood what was going on? So for me specifically, having good levels of estrogen, and also I went into menopause pretty quickly. I didn't have a buffer. I didn't have 10 years.
Yeah.
No,
And
I
you
didn't.
weren't
I was very
aware
young. I was
prior.
45, so they didn't expect it at all.
So there were no precursors that you might have anticipated
No,
before
just
that.
sleeping badly and just a bit of mood roller coasters and inability to cope with life.
Is this what they call like this overnight menopause as well? It's sort of like
No, there is no overnight. The overnight or probably would be if suddenly you have a surgery.
Yeah.
where
okay,
Yeah.
and that might just sort of
Medical induced.
catalyze
Yeah.
the process.
That's the overnight. Otherwise, from your body, it cannot happen overnight.
Okay.
It has to have 12 months of you not having periods at all.
okay.
That's what is after
The classical
after
definition.
365 days of you not having any periods. That next day would be saying, yes, I have hit menopause. So even on the 365th day, if you end up having periods, you've got to go back to
You're
the
still
whole
back.
cycle
That's
of the
really
1 year.
insightful. I mean, I think we, again, the medical definition escapes a lot of us, self included. So it's helpful to know that
Yeah,
it's
1
really
year.
that 365 one year period. That's when you kind of notice and you can say
Yeah.
that you've actually kind of crossed over. Okay, just coming back to the ADHD topic, because I think this is just the the sort of correlation
Yeah.
between again, like I said, not going to attempt to use any of the technical terms,
Fine, don't worry.
but between sort of the onset of ADHD. So would this sort of just come about in someone's sort of midlife without having any?
So it depends on what the triggers are.
Indications
So
when
for me,
they're
I
younger.
am COMT deficient. I am MTHFR deficient. So this is all methylation, which then impacts. So even there's another one that nobody ever talks about when it comes to women in the longevity space. There's something called PEMT, and PEMT as well is a methylation gene, and it's impacted by low estrogen, and it is responsible for reducing choline. And choline is what we need in the brain to have improved cognitive function. So if you're a woman and you are struggling at work, you can't find words.
Brain
Number-
fog. I think a
brain
lot of us
fog,
use the
cognitive
term.
function, yeah, that's all of it. And it's often then you could have a double whammy of having both just not the greatest gene profile, which then while you've compounded with the low estrogen, maybe a baby as well, young kids, keeping you up at night, stress, and then
That's quite a concoction.
it is quite a concoction. So in those cases, it has to be kind of tailored intervention, and I chose HRT because my mom's got osteopenia and osteoporosis as well. So
Right. Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
this is incredible to know. So I'm assuming it's not as simple as taking one's calcium and magnesium tabs. It sounds a lot deeper than that, and clearly running even way back to
Yeah.
genetics. I do have a couple of friends, and I'm pretty curious because again, ADHD is something that it's less talked about, is prevalent. Again, noticing the symptoms, because I think we tend to label a little bit and tend to say that boys are hyperactive and girls are fairly introverted. Not always the case, I think, but at the same time, is there that sort of, like you said, that nuance?
That's why I wasn't identified
Yeah.
when I was a young kid, and that's why in standard 8, which is grade 9 here, that's why for me there was such an epiphany, because my hyper focus comes in when I find something I'm passionate about,
Interesting.
and that's why I can read research papers for days. Don't put me in front of TV.
Oh, it's
I'm not
wonderful. You
interested.
used it as a superpower. It's like turn
It is,
it
but it's
in-
a different
to your
different
advantage.
expression. So that's where science has moved on, both in the mental field as well as the diagnosis. But that is one of the biggest things we see now. And just knowing your gene profile can also set you up just to help you navigate with nutrition and food, you can influence the expression of your genes. So even if you've got them, we can put buffers and things in place and catch-alls so that you can actually mitigate them to as much as you can.
I really like the concept of working with what you got, sort of a thing, right? So I think even using a diagnosis to your advantage and being able to turn it into a little bit of a superpower. If you know that you've got certain attention spans, or this is the way I work best. In my simplistic mind, I used to call it, just work windows. Like for me personally, I really enjoy working at certain times of day, and I find myself super focused. And other times I just need to have a little lie down. And that's frankly, okay, that might be exacerbated by the fact that I have a toddler. But but apart from that, I think that's also been a little bit has been my ethos. And one of the reasons why I established Beyond Careers, because I do feel like, the sort of work systems haven't evolved since the early 1900s, I want to say, when Henry Ford came up with it. And since then, it's, the classical 9 to 5 is stuck around, which is understandable because to some extent one's got to generalize to be able to actually create some basic frameworks for the majority, if you will, of society. The question is now, with all of these various impacts and influences, is that dynamic changing? And how can we adapt our working processes to become more inclusive and even cater for, like you've said, different diagnoses, various autoimmune diseases which aren't recognized? Because, again, I don't know if this is something that you're at liberty to discuss, but it's also, when we think about people with determination, we think of a certain, we pigeonhole.
Yeah.
But we don't think of, someone who might have a different way of approaching life, their day-to-day lives, and who might be facing symptoms, like you said, with menopause, and other things. So I'd love to hear your take on that, because I know, Guy, you do a lot of work with workplace well-being.
When you just mention people of determination, I think, I don't know how many people are going to take this in the right way. I feel women in their perimenopause and menopause should be labeled as people of determination.
Okay, all right.
Because
a different take.
I would put that, like if I have to take you really deep down, I would say yes, we end up having a lot of challenges. Brain fog, the hot flashes, you don't, the night sweats, you don't sleep well. It affects you so much. You're happy at one second, the next you don't know why you're shouting at people. You are challenged at that time. Maybe not physically, but mentally you're completely challenged. You should be in the same category of POD. And if companies are working towards making policies for people of determination, there should be the same category done for women going through perimenopause and menopause. I think as simple as that.
That is a very bold stance and a very interesting one, I have to say. Dr. Vanessa, what do you reckon?
I think as well there's always the hidden disease, whether it's perimenopause, mental health, whether it's diseases that make you appear you're okay on the outside but actually give you a lot of pain. And I think our society wants people who are perfect and they're behind their desks working at 130%, 9 to 10, never mind 9 to 5. And I think people are often too scared to venture that this doesn't really work for me. This environment doesn't work for me. I am neurodivergent, whatever. So many people fall on the neurodivergency scale, but are high functioning. They could have a slight autism, and maybe for them sitting, for me, sitting here, I can hear there's an AC and it's in my left ear, and that's all I can hear, but that's just my neurodivergency kicking in.
I'm really light sensitive, so I feel you.
So, but it's little things like that desk doesn't work for me because that is too cold for me. And I think that our society and our expectation in the boardroom is we've got to perform, otherwise we will lose our jobs. And as a result of that, people don't speak up. And that's where it goes back to women should be able to say to their boss, I need to step out for an hour, take my meeting. I need to get under the coolest AC. Or, I'm really not having a good day. If you've got endometriosis, you may be having the most horrific day just before your period starts because you're in immense pain.
Yeah.
And you should be able to say to your boss, I'm working from home today. My endometriosis is flared up. But we don't have an open
We don't have those
conversation,
discussions. Mm-hmm.
especially about women's health. And I think there's been progression, whether it's
We've come a
women's
long
health, neurodivergency, autoimmune diseases, and I think that it would be great to see people valued for their work ability rather than who they are on the outside and whether they're sitting at the desk ticking the boxes.
Well, I'd love to see empowerment in its truest form, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean, checking off boxes. I think it means really being able to support people in the way they need to be and want to be supported. Not saying that all women need to get back to work if that's not right for them at the right time. So it's about being able to maintain an air of flexibility while also being conscious leaders and self-advocating as well, being able to have these discussions even for themselves to break the taboo. Guy, I know you.
Yeah, there was this new rule that UAE passed, right? That every company, every private organization needs to have a lady in the boardroom starting from 2025. I'm happy. It's a very good step that's been taken. But what are you doing to actually support that woman? Giving a space or a seat in a boardroom is different. But are you making the right cultural changes within the organization to actually support her? Where she actually feels that, yes, I'm capable, and of course she's capable. Whether, I'm sitting on this chair, I've got the support. Is that there? Because a woman goes through a lot of changes compared to men. We have babies. There is the whole gap that you take in your career at that time. But then with, societal pressures, even the pressures that women put on themselves, they want to go, they want to achieve, We all want to have our own identity and not just be known as XYZ's wife or, my children's mum, right?
Well, the country can only do so much to implement frameworks and measures, and then it is up to the private sector to take it and run as well. So I do believe that, just to add to your point, Gayu, I do feel that, the quotas do have its place alongside a number of steps that need to be taken to fix the broken rung, and that includes being able to support female returners. Women returners, we know, tend to find it harder to get back into the workforce after a career gap. Their confidence levels get affected, plus the knock-on effects of perimenopause or menopause, and just simply taking on a majority of caregiving duties as well does affect one's ability to contribute in the typical expected way. Saying that, again, I understand as well that somehow, companies do need to turn a profit and they do need to be productive. And so our objective is really finding that balance. Somehow we've got to be able to get there. And it might be a utopia, it might not be a quick fix. But I do believe that a holistic approach through a combination of, national mandates together with supportive systems, policies, and procedures, that's what's going to make the difference. And that's really why we're here today having these sorts of discussions, because health plays a central role in all of this. I do believe, at least.
Well, I think at the end of the day, if you don't have a healthy team, your work output is going to be full of mistakes. The number of women that think they have dementia during perimenopause because they can't find a word or they keep forgetting something because they're not being supported and they're under pressure is quite significant. And at the end of the day, it's actually the company's success that is going to be at risk. It becomes a bit of a no-brainer in my view, but I realize that that's my view.
Yeah. I understand there is the expense associated with implementing anything new. But that's always been, right? In general, anything new that you do, it'll not go easily in the first place. But you've got to put the numbers and measure it against the benefit that you're going to get by supporting the women. I personally feel women are much more productive and contribute more to a company's success than men do.
Well, it's
That's just my personal opinion.
Okay, we welcome all opinions, and I think, I tend to be really neutral, and I believe in supporting both the sexes, and I do think that women are inclined differently for sure. We're natural multitaskers, which I think sometimes can be to our own detriment, because this thing, this concept that we've worn like a badge of honor is what effectively leads to burnout at times. And, because we're running ourselves ragged, trying to maintain a home, aspire for this full-on career, and we're thinking about constantly running or climbing this ladder at warp speed, whereas perhaps it's time, like, if I may say, both of you women have done really successfully, looking at, maybe parallels to the ladder. Maybe we don't all need to be on the same sort of ladder. There could be a sidestep even.
I think it's
and finding a passion.
Yeah, I think it's circumstantial though, and I think that's where I'm very blessed. I'm not forced to go into a 9 to 5 because I am so lucky that my husband is so supportive, and not every woman has that gift in her life. Yeah. And my husband's a gem.
Oh, so shout out to hubby there.
He does. I carry a lot. He carries a lot, but we have very different roles, and
it's teamwork.
It is, and I think that's where I acknowledge I sit in a very privileged position to be able to run my own studies, my degrees, my self-development, alongside having 2 kids in school who I am very involved with their day-to-day lives. They're not on the bus, and that can be tough, juggling. But at the same time, I know that that's a privilege. So sometimes it is about understanding each woman has got a very different set of social, financial circumstances, and recognizing that sometimes being able to do something in parallel is...
That's a great point. And that's the thing. I think, and what I was coming to is really, there are various formats of work as well. And what you've just said, Dr. Vanessa, is really also being able to recognize the support systems we have, the resources that are available to us, the circumstances as well, because again, just like the working environment is it places an expectation that there's a one-size-fits-all. Similarly, there isn't a one-size-fits-all that should apply to all of us, and all of us being women's expectations that we place on ourselves. Yeah. And it could just be, can we explore, a side hustle? Can we, look into another avenue, perhaps subtly at first, whilst having a career full-time, or maybe a full-time career isn't for me. Maybe we're looking at hybrid options or part-time, or whatever's realistic given the circumstances in the environment.
It's I would say it's easier said than done in that case, right? But for some people, that career is all that you've got. You've put so many years of hard work into achieving, and then suddenly you're in this top position in the, and then suddenly, and that's when you're 45, 50, and then you get all these symptoms hitting you, and
the
suddenly
boat gets rocked.
Yeah, and then you start having self-doubt, like, I am, so and so, and now people are now trying, and now they am suddenly talking in a meeting, and I forget what I'm talking about. You start, there is your own self-esteem goes for a little shock.
That's a great perspective.
But this is what you've always done. Why would I suddenly leave my job because I am going through hormonal change, which is natural. It is not that I have done something, I've taken some other substance that's causing this, right? It's natural, it's happening. This is the time I feel that if there was support from an organization, she would go from here to there. And she would take the people with her. Women are someone who always support, and they help people grow. She grows, the company grows. That's what I would say.
She brings so much empathy. And I think, also noticing the changes in her own life, she'd probably be a little bit more aware for others as well.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, when I've gone and trained corporates, there are people who, they say, how have you? They say people have addressed me as, oh, she's going crazy, or, don't talk to her and stuff like that. But she's not going crazy just because she wants to go crazy. There was something happening. But if the education was there, if there was awareness, then this would not be that, it's probably that day of the month of, that's not how people would speak. They would.
I think now it's safe to say most people would probably get, a kind of a raised eyebrow and then some if they said that to someone or said, oh, it's that time of month. I don't think that would be met very fondly.
Women on the corporate ladder as well, they will turn down promotions during perimenopause because they don't feel that they can rise to the same level. So they will turn down promotional opportunities, which, as we know, are in itself a challenge for women to climb the corporate ladder as quickly, as equally as men. And yet now, because of hormonal shifts, not only, some women move out, and other women will actually turn down promotional opportunities, or they won't have the confidence to go for the interviews. And so they really are setting themselves back quite a lot in terms of their career development until they kind of get that support, however that is, and kind of get through the other side.
And that's where we're seeing that churn.
It is a big
That's
churn.
pretty evident as well from the numbers. I'm conscious that we are running out of time, so I want to say thank you both, ladies. Since this is Boardrooms and Breakthroughs, I obviously have to ask before you leave, what has been a breakthrough for you, both of you? Gaia, you want to get started?
Breakthrough in what sense?
In your life, have you ever had a breakthrough, something that stood out and a turning point, if you will?
I think a turning point would be me hitting rock bottom for me. When I always was this, again, very, very ambitious person, and I want to achieve, I want to do this. And then when I was in borderline depression, I think that probably was that turning point where I said, no, I can't do this to myself.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's incredible. And now that you've really come through the other side of it, I mean, it's just incredible what you're achieving, you've done, and how you're championing for other women as well. So
just
really
doing my
appreciate
bit.
you being here. Dr. Vanessa?
Mine's a bit of an irony. My genetic profile is the worst out of any client that I have ever tested. And it took 2 months of depression when I got those results in, because I was like, you are kidding me, I should be dead.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But I think that I always say to my clients, here, let me show you my genes, and let me show you my health. My current biological age, even though I am 48, is 36.
Wow.
And I do work hard, but I think it's living proof that it doesn't matter what you are given.
It's incredible.
You can still live a healthy life as much as you are able to. And you don't have to accept that, oh, I have this gene, this is what's going to happen to me. There's just so much power in how you live your life. And I hope that inspires somebody.
That's amazing. I do have to ask, because now you've got me on that trend now. It's like, oh, we can't leave the show without just asking for this final nuggets of wisdom. What advice would you give to someone who's experiencing perimenopause or menopause? What nutritional quick tips can you offer? I know it's not a quick topic or something that you can really easily cover off in a few minutes or a few points, but to the best that you can, just some takeaways that you think someone who is entering that stage of their lives, what advice would you give them?
I would say, first of all, accept it. Educate yourself. And in terms of nutritional thing, I would say start focusing on increasing your protein intake, because you will have to take an extra effort to maintain the muscle mass, which normally keeps decreasing, but with perimenopause, it's at a higher risk. So focus on getting more protein in. I mean, I can tell you 20,000 things, but I think from one thing, increase your protein
I'll
intake.
be tracking my protein as of today. Vanessa, what do you say?
I'll go a slightly different angle. I think the most important thing is to own your own data every year. So if you're in that stage, I think it's really important for you to do a comprehensive blood test and also do a urine testing, which will then give you your metabolites. It will assess whether your estrogen and your so for ER+2 cancer, it will help you to assess your hormone levels, where you need to work, and what nutrients you need to put in to move the genes along. I think, and find somebody who can help you to interpret that in a very integrative way, whether they're looking at hormone replacement or nutrition, you know, and work with it. Because I think if you don't know what's going on deeply with yourself, I think it's very difficult to advocate and make sure that you are working together with your doctor to really choose the right healthcare plan for you.
Amazing. So we've got the scientific, we've got the integrative, nutritional aspect. Thank you again, ladies. Gayu, Vanessa, pleasure to have you both.
Thank you for having us.
And good luck with your podcast.
Yeah,
It's
thank
been
you.
amazing.
All right. I'll just do a little closing note. If you guys enjoyed listening or watching this episode, please follow, give us a like and some love. We've got a few really exciting episodes coming up in the pipeline. We'll be talking about empathy, AI, and a whole lot more, including mindset. So stay tuned. And don't forget to complete the Return to Work survey for 2025. We're looking forward to your feedback. Help us bring more insights into the world. See you soon.